Hello and welcome to Politics Today. I'm Farrukh Pitafi. Today we are going to talk about Prime Minister of Pakistan's address at UNGA's 76th session. It was, as expected, it was pithy talk. He actually covered a lot of ground. Today what we are going to do is we are going to focus on what he said about Kashmir, the human rights abuses in Kashmir, the way Indian Hindutva government has weaponized the Islamophobia against the people of India and especially Kashmir. And in Indian illegally occupied Kashmir, it must be pointed out that the Prime Minister said that India is trying to enforce the final solution. If you remember what that means, it reminds you of what Hitler was trying to do. Demographic shifts are being brought in illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, and there India hopes that it is going to do away with the people, and then perhaps they are going to have their Liberam or the living space for their own Hindu majority. That is one aspect. The Prime Minister also pointed out how Ali Gilani, a senior leader of APHC, when he died, he was deprived of final rights, and the way Indians actually buried him without any final rights at all. And then the Prime Minister demanded that India should actually extend that courtesy. And finally, the Prime Minister also spoke about this dossier. This dossier, if you remember, a couple of weeks ago, we had actually detailed in this program, and we had pointed out how India is abusing human rights. And that is not all. The kind of horrible torture that is meted out to the people of Kashmir is hair-raising, and it actually shakes the very soul. You can see some of the visuals that were released along with this report, but there is a package that our team has actually prepared for you. Let us first watch that, and then we are going to introduce the panel and then continue with the discussion as well.
While addressing the 76th session of the United Nations General Assembly, Prime Minister Imran Khan voiced deep concern over rising religious hatred, increased nationalism and worsening global tensions, factors that have accentuated Islamophobia, resulting in attacks against Muslims in many countries.
Terrorism has been associated with Islam by some quarters. This has increased the tendency of right-wing, xenophobic and violent nationalists, extremists and terrorist groups to target Muslims. I call on the Secretary General to convene a global dialogue on countering the rise of Islamophobia. The worst and most pervasive form of Islamophobia now rules India. The hate-filled Hindutva ideology propagated by the fascist RSS-BJP regime has unleashed a reign of fear and violence against India's 200 million Muslim strong community.
He stressed that willful provocations and incitements to hate must be universally outlawed, calling on the General Assembly to declare an international day to combat Islamophobia. Prime Minister Imran Khan accused India of state-sponsored Islamophobia. In India, mosques have been destroyed and Muslims have been killed, and they are at risk of losing their nationality due to discriminatory laws. He called out world leaders for letting India get away with human rights abuses for the sake of commercial interests. Pakistan presented a comprehensive dossier unmasking the true face of Indian atrocities in illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, diminishing the room for any doubt. The 131-page dossier highlighted grave human rights violations, including rapes, sexual assault, enforced disappearances, use of pellet guns against civilians, as well as mass graves. Prime Minister Imran Khan also underlined that for durable peace in the South Asian region, the Jammu and Kashmir dispute needs to be resolved on the basis of international legitimacy. Prime Minister Imran Khan called on the United Nations Secretary General to take the lead in preventing global conflict. He urged the convening summit-level meetings to address regional hotspots and resolve outstanding disputes.
Right. So you have watched the package. Let me introduce the panel today. I have with me in the studio Dr. Zafar Nawaz Jaspal Sahab, who is an expert on foreign affairs. Dr. Sahab, thank you very much for joining us. On Skype, we are joined by Lieutenant General retired Amjad Shoaib Sahab, a senior analyst and specialist security analyst. Thank you very much, sir, for being part of the program. And on telephone, we are joined by Asim Iftikhar Sahab, who is a spokesman of Foreign Office of Pakistan. Asim Iftikhar Sahab, thank you very much, sir, for being part of the program as well. With your permission, gentlemen, I'm going to start with the studio. I have with me Dr. Zafar Nawaz Jaspal. So, Jaspal Sahab, your take on the speech. You have heard the basic components of the speech, right? The question is not that it has been repeatedly highlighted, and we have this massive dossier as well. Do you think that it can change how the world politics actually operates?
I think that to be very realistic, in real politics, interests are different. Yeah. But at the same time, we say that what Prime Minister did, and he tried to highlight the what is happening in the region, what will be its repercussion in the region, and how the things are transforming. He basically alarmed the international community that if you are not paying attention towards the genocide of the Kashmiris or this increasing fascist ideology, Hindutva ideological rule in India, it will be going to not only devastate this region, but it will be having a lasting impact. Because the references to the Islamic phobia and Islamic phobia repercussions are not only in India, in many other parts. And naturally, we have seen the action and reaction to these kind of the things. So if we keep in mind, I do understand on the one side, Americans or their allies are looking India as their strategic partner to check or balance China's rise in Asia, but at the same time, they are forgetting. If you see that when President Biden came into power, everyone was writing, and we debated this point in your programs many times, that with the Biden, values will be heard. And to date, I'm sorry to say, we are failing to identify. But at the same time,
we haven't seen proof of that.
What the Democrats
order.
But on the other side, don't forget that Prime Minister Modi, when was going to the meeting for this Quad, many senators raised this issue. And I think that the Prime Minister highlighted these issues very correctly, and they have an impact, at least maybe not impact in changing the policies of the Americans or the others, but at least it is sensitizing the international community.
And that seems to be their game plan, to sensitize the people of democracies so that their governments actually come under pressure to act as well. Let me bring in General Sahab. General Amjad Shoaib Sahab, your take on Prime Minister's speech and how this matter can be taken forward.
I think it was a very comprehensive speech which actually dealt with all the issues. Some of those are confronted by the Muslims overall, I would say the Muslim community in the world, and there are issues which were concerned with Pakistan, like Afghanistan and Kashmir issue. And I think as far as the problems which Muslims are facing in India, that was also highlighted, particularly in Kashmir, where Sayyid Ali Shah Gilani's burial was not allowed to be held by his own family. I think it was a violation and at the same time a great mistake on the part of Indian government, where they, I think, deprived the family of the last rites. I would say that whatever we have been seeing during the last few weeks, etc., the Islamophobia that we say is prevailing in India, I think Islamophobia overall, it is there in many Western countries also. But in India, it is more than Islamophobia. It is I think it is a very, very sort of, one may say, a stereotype of hatred towards the Muslim. I'm sure you must see a video clip where a Muslim young man was killed by the Indian police in Assam, and then there was a journalist who was jumping on the dead body. So this is the hatred which was oozing out of that person who was jumping with so much of enthusiasm that one could see that he is almost mad with his hatred towards the Muslim. So that is, I think, scaring scenario which is developing in India. The Muslim population, I don't think they'll be able to survive in this kind of atmosphere. They will have to think about their future and do something else, or may perhaps approach the international authorities or international organizations to seek justice for themselves. So I think these are the. But Prime Minister, I think, was very candid. I think he gave everything. I think.
Right.
And
General Saab, allow me to actually bring in the third guest. Atim Iftihar Saab, you must be listening to our other participants. Now the question is, I understand that the Prime Minister's speech was very articulate. He addressed all the concerned issues. When you talk about limitations of action, even if the world powers want to nudge India in the right direction, it seems that, even in the liberal world order, you have to have limitations to nation states and their free will. How do you actually propose that these arguments and what you have described in this dossier as well be taken forward and be pursued in coming days?
Yes, thank you very much for having me. I think as the other participants have said, and as in your introductory remarks, the Prime Minister's address in this current context was of critical importance in putting across, in the first place, Pakistan's narrative from this global platform of the UN. So when you look at the address as a whole, you see that he spoke about COVID-19, he spoke about climate change and other issues which are issues of common concern, and then he came to Islamophobia. And very rightly, he mentioned that the worst and most pervasive form of Islamophobia was ruling India. And from there he built this argument, that this hate-filled Hindutva ideology perpetrated by the fascist RSS BJP regime, it is the main problem. And then he comes to Kashmir, and you saw that it was a very effective, forceful and emphatic presentation of Pakistan's position on Jammu and Kashmir, and a very passionate, I would say, presentation of the situation in which the Kashmiri people find themselves in the Indian-occupied Kashmir. So you see, he spelled out the whole range of human rights violations that are being committed there by the 9,000 plus occupation forces. Then he mentions also in particular the illegal actions that the Indian occupation has taken from 5th August 2019 onwards, and the attempts in particular to change the demographic structure in the occupied territory. And then, as you mentioned, the Prime Minister, he referred to the dossier that Pakistan is unveiled on 12th of September. And this is a detailed dossier, as you have also said yourself. It contains more than 3,000 actually cases of documented war crimes by senior officers of the Indian Army. And the total of 118 Indian Army units have been found to be involved in these crimes. Now, this dossier comes with very clear incriminating evidence, both audio and video, about the human rights violations and war crimes that have been committed. Now this is the background. Then the Prime Minister mentions that apart from the human rights aspect, The fact that the Kashmir dispute is outstanding for 70 years, it requires attention, global attention of the international community. So that's where he mentions that Pakistan desires peace with India, but the onus is on India to create a conducive environment. And then he lists, what are the conditions. He mentions clearly that India needs to reverse its unilateral and illegal measures since 5th of August, stop human rights violations and oppression, and halt and reverse the demographic change. Now, this is the context. Now, the question that you asked me, and I think it was also raised by others, I think there is a change that is very much visible. So, if you look at, last 2 years, since 2019, 5th August actions, you have seen a lot of naming and shaming of India has taken place. And the international media, the mainstream international media has written, reported a lot on Kashmir, and I think a lot of it is due to what Pakistan has been telling the international community for quite a long time.
Right. Hold this thought. I'm going to come back to you. Allow me to go to the studio. And Zafar Nawaz just pulls up. Here is the story. I mean, we have all the factors, all the elements to actually convince the world that something needs to be done. And the Prime Minister also pointed out that for the business interest, don't compromise on your principles. But can you actually keep on arguing this and make a case and then convince everybody to do something about it?
I think that we have no other option.
Why not?
Because when we say we are living in a civilized world, we have to argue, we have to go with this kind of a thing. And United Nations Assembly and these kind of the forums are very much there. So in that context, when we are looking, definitely, I think the procedure or whatever Pakistan has adopted, a tactic or a strategy, it seems very viable. Because we have been hammering, and as Asim was very rightly pointing out, if you see in the last 2 years, what is the outcome? Outcome is that many have started talking about Kashmiris. Many have started condemning what you call it, Prime Minister Modi's policies in Indian illegally occupied Kashmir.
Right.
So by this way, I think that the world has been sensitized.
Right.
Though I do agree with you what you said, that in this realpolitik or in this transforming geopolitical environment, whether it will be having any effect, I think effect is there.
Right. The concern at this moment is when August 5th incident actually took place, that policy shift came. At that time, we saw international media covering Kashmir. Wall-to-wall coverage was there and very diligently doing it. But with every passing day, they kind of give up. And why? Because India has all the economic muscle and influence. So how to counteract that, sir?
No, first of all is that as we all know, media go with the flashes where the new thing happen.
Every day something new is happening.
And I think it's a big effort of the government of Pakistan that it succeeded in sustaining this effort of highlighting continuously every day. Like now recently they came up with this dossier, and earlier they have maintained. Yeah. So it's a continuous struggle to maintain it in the media. Otherwise, look, Afghanistan happened, China, Russia, Quad, many things are happening. So media is always in search of a new stories, not in the old stories.
Dr. Saab, have you seen that picture where a grandfather is killed by the Indian forces and his grandson is sitting on the chest of the dead body?
And then he was fighting with a stone with his soldiers.
Yeah, but that picture, I mean, it was not even reported in international media. Is it not a big report?
No, I think that it was reported because I have seen it at that time.
One outlet.
Yeah, maybe not as you are expecting, but it was reported. But please keep in mind, media go after the advertisements, and in the advertisement, Indian diaspora, Indian
Irlan Kurdi, the kid who actually sank in waters, his picture was covered all over the media. The kid who suffered the trauma in Kashmir cannot be a lesser human being, can he?
No, if there is some kind of the human rights violation, one person or two in Pakistan, it is covered by entire world. And if there is thousands are killed or genocide is there, international jurists are convinced, Amnesty International is reporting, but it has not been shown as it must be shown in the international media, because it establishes that media follows the advertisement. Basically, money makes the difference.
All right. So these human rights are sponsored by new advertisement, right? Let me go to Gerald Saab. Gerald Saab, you must be listening to the argument that is going on. I understand that initially Western media kept on covering what was happening in Kashmir, and at that time even lawmakers were debating these issues. But now it seems that even though the British Parliament discussed the situation in Kashmir, we haven't seen that kind of advocacy coming from their side. We know that Prime Minister of Pakistan, being so articulate, is perhaps our best advocate. Should he and our Foreign Minister and other ministers and influentials be advocating it more aggressively every day all over the world?
Yes, I think it's a competition between India and Pakistan of their narrative and all to put in. I think.
Jalal Sahab, you'll have to repeat the last line because your voice seems to be breaking, sir.
Result-oriented, and if you see that it is not producing result, then naturally you have to put in more effort and you have to adopt various other means to convey your own message to the rest of the world. But to say that, I was saying that it's a sort of competition between the two narratives, India and Pakistan. So naturally it has to be result oriented. If we see that we are not getting that result, so naturally we have to put in more effort. But at the same time, to say that the international community is not responding, I think that will not be correct. Even today, I saw an article in an Israeli newspaper in which they have compared Kashmir with the Nazi action of 1930s. So the atmosphere which was developing in Germany at that time, they say under Modi, the similar conditions are developing in Kashmir. So if Israel can address this thing, I think the Western countries will definitely, they do have realization. They may not be really supporting the Kashmiris openly, but I am sure that they must be expressing their concern to the Indian government on various occasions. Sometimes it's not made public. So far as this human rights violation is concerned, international community is always sensitive to the human rights violation, and it is only the question of engaging certain think tanks, engaging certain important people here and there, and sometimes to send the delegations, like women delegation, to speak for the rights of the women, or like we had this incident of Kanan and Poshpura, where the girls and some elderly ladies were molested by the Indian Army in I think just during one night. So such things are there, and people are not getting justice. The case is pending in Indian Supreme Court for the last about 8-9 years. So such are the things which can be spoken about, which can be talked about in international fora, and we can send the delegations of our some of the ladies who have the requisite expression to cover up this subject. So such like things must be done. But I am very happy to say that international community has started to paying some attention and listening.
General Sir, yes. Very quickly, I'm sure that you have seen the dossier that is in my possession at this moment as well. And some of these pictures are harrowing, right? The question at this moment is, had there been so much evidence that a country is using chemical weapons allegedly against its own, the people it calls its own, had it not been India, do you think that this case would have stopped anywhere but at ICC?
I don't know, but I think one could have tried. After all, a case which is of criminal nature, where the Geneva Conventions have been violated, I think it could have been. If you recall, in Kulbhushan's case also, the International Court of Justice, they had invoked the Geneva Conventions. And they said that the prisoner has the right at Geneva Convention to see the...
And that's a very good point, sir. Allow me to actually go back to Asim Saab. Asim Saab, you are listening to the comments. I have to ask you about this dossier. It is available on the Foreign Office's website. But where else do you intend to send it, sir? UNGA, UNSC, elsewhere, sir?
Yes, thank you. I think this dossier is in a way different from the earlier dossier that we presented last year on Indian involvement in terrorism in Pakistan.
Right.
Now, this document, we have made it public right from the word go. And this is publicly available on the website. It has a barcode, QR code. It can be accessed electronically. It can be transmitted and shared electronically, and the reason is that we want to share it widely, most widely possible dissemination is the objective. And we are doing that. We have, for example, we have briefed the entire diplomatic corps in Islamabad, handed them over the copies of the dossier. All our embassies abroad are doing that. We are doing it in New York, in Geneva. The Foreign Minister, during all his interactions in New York recently, he shared the copies of the dossier. It has been handed over to the UN Secretary General. So this is being done widely. It is being shared with the international human rights organizations, civil society, and very wide circulation is in process. Now, I just wanted to comment a little bit on the discussion. I think, this question whether enough is being done or the response of the international community is good enough or not. I think this is what the Prime Minister, said very emphatically, and that is why he referred to selectivity and double standards. And the expectation obviously is that although international community has started talking about it and taking notice of it, but they need to do more. Now, what the Pakistan government is doing, I think some of the comments are right, and this is not a one-time thing that you do one day and then it's for another time. It's a consistent effort, and especially since 5th August 2019. The entire government machinery, especially our missions abroad and here in the Foreign Ministry, this has been a key objective of the government to sensitize the international community on what is happening in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. That is why you see that there are positive things coming up. There are debates in the world parliaments. You saw in the US Congress, you have seen debates in EU, House of Commons, recent one you mentioned. Then if you look at whose narrative is being given attention. Look at the UN Secretary General statements. He has expressed concern about the human rights violations. Immediately after the 5th August 2019, the very first statement he gave, he said the UN's position remains consistent and it is guided by the UN Security Council resolutions and the Charter. That position is totally 100% the position of Pakistan, and he urged the parties not to take any unilateral actions that might change the status quo. That is also the position of Pakistan. So this is our narrative which is being echoed by the UN Secretary General. Then you look at how the High Commissioner for Human Rights has raised this issue in the two reports of 2018 and 2019. How the special rapporteurs and procedures of the Human Rights Council, they have engaged themselves and they have sent several joint communications to the Government of India on what they are doing in the occupied Jammu and Kashmir. And India has nothing to respond to. That's why they are avoiding to engage with them. So all of this, I think, is going on, and it is going on in a very concerted, serious effort, and we will continue to do this. And this is where the dossier comes in. We know that there is lack of access to international media. There is a communication blackout. It is not easy to report from ground on what is happening in Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir.
Right.
That
Right. So that's a very good point, and I really want this report, this dossier to be on every lawmaker in the world's table, and perhaps our expatriates can actually help in this cause as well. I'm going to come back to you, Asim Saab. I'm told that we have to take a break. When we come back from the break, we are going to talk about Prime Minister's article in Washington Post, where he actually talks about how responsibility of Afghanistan's situation actually lies with the Western powers, not with those who are in this vicinity, particularly Pakistan, that has sacrificed so much. We have to take a break. Let us come back and discuss this. Take a break. Right, welcome back. Let me tell you what the Prime Minister actually wrote in his article today that was published in Washington Post. And I quote, "I was surprised to see that no mention was made of Pakistan's sacrifices as a US ally in the war on terror for more than 2 decades. Instead, we were blamed for America's loss." The Prime Minister of Pakistan. Then he goes on to say, instead of facing this reality, the Afghan and Western governments created a convenient scapegoat by blaming Pakistan, wrongly accusing us of providing safe havens to the Taliban and allowing its free movement across our borders. Then he further says, "I'm convinced that the right thing for the world now is to engage with the new Afghan government to ensure peace and stability. The international community will want to see the inclusion of major ethnic groups in government, respect for the rights of all Afghans, and commitments that Afghan soil shall never again be used for terrorism against any country." This was Prime Minister of Pakistan. He actually wrote this article, which was really quite comprehensive when it comes to Afghanistan situation. Let me very quickly take the opinion of the participants in the program as well. Dr. Jaspal, your take on the Prime Minister's arguments made in this piece.
I think that I have gone through this article, and Prime Minister built a good case. Yeah. That is an incorrect way to make the Pakistan a scapegoat instead of realizing what was the reason. And Prime Minister argued from very beginning to the end of this article by narrating that he was opposing this military solution was not acceptable. Yeah. And now ultimately after 2 decades you agreed.
Consistency matters.
And then he said that he highlighted very important point that Pakistan lost $150 billion and 80,000 people and 3.5 million displacement. Yeah. So these were the factors which the Americans are ignoring. Yeah. And in the Washington Post, when the Prime Minister made this case, it's a very strong case, but at the same time, it tried to drive the attention towards 2 points. A, simple scapegoating Pakistan is not a solution. B, if you engage the Taliban, then there is more chances, and he used the word, I think Taliban has ability and will for not permitting the what you call it, or not permitting the Afghan soil can be used by the terrorists.
Right.
No, but at the same time, it's correct that if they do not engage Taliban, and if there is the economic meltdown, then definitely they go for this survival for other means, and you know that illegal means always are in the favor of the non-detectors.
If the world doesn't engage, on one side we are heading towards a humanitarian crisis, on the other side there's going to be possibility of safe havens of terrorism as well.
Yeah, but Pakistan, as Prime Minister, I think, highlighted very correctly that Pakistan being the biggest neighbor and biggest sufferer, and we lost in the last 4 decades many things. We are really a stakeholder, and that's why we are pleading their case. Otherwise, he also said that the inclusive government of these kind of the things. But if you see, the Prime Minister highlighted the same thing which our, you can say, opinion maker, I mean the media people or the contributors, they have been highlighting a lot, that the Americans have started making this scapegoat. And basically Prime Minister started with this, why was so agitated to start this, or what was the driving force. If you see that in the last 1 month after 15, and then in the last 2-3 weeks especially, there were Congress hearings. And every senator was very interesting, where they were criticizing Biden administration or Trump administration. At the end of the day, instead of paying attention, there are 300,000 people whom they trained. They were just a sand wall, but they were saying, oh, Pakistan. When they were investing, and Prime Minister was simply saying that please understand why the Afghans can fight for your sake when you are leaving.
And
it's a very, you can say...
there were 2 hearings, right? One, the House hearing, the other Senate hearing. In the House hearing, when people like Ami Bhera are speaking, they come from India, they perhaps were not open to adjustability, right? That seems to be a problem, and that seems to be an area where India keeps on, beating us.
No, but there's an alarming point. I think the Prime Minister made it very clear, and we need to make it, because Prime Minister is a Prime Minister. We have to make it. Why Americans are saying that Pakistan will be judged because the way Taliban behave. Still Americans thinking that we are living for our survival on their military assistance. We are no more living on their assistance. These are the realities with which we have to live.
Right. That's a good point. General Saab, you want to chip in, sir? You want to, give your 2 cents?
Prime Minister has very strongly out of this thing, that we have so long been advocating for the military solution should not be solution. Ultimately, you have to table. And we also, I think, advocate that the Americans should stay on, and at least they should force the Ashraf Ghani government to come to the negotiation table. They had influence on India and they had influence on Ashraf Ghani. Both were the spoilers, and they never really felt that necessity of going to the negotiation table. They kept on harping upon their own themes and stories. Ashraf Ghani every time suggesting his own solution without going to the negotiation. So these were the things which Pakistan has been saying, and if America would have prevented India to spoil the whole show and also pushed Ashraf Ghani to go to the negotiation table, at least things would have, I think they would have taken some shape. Now I think we are neither here nor there. Now we are telling the international community that you must remain in touch with the Taliban, you must engage them, but Taliban, now they are at their own. They may form an all-inclusive government or they may not form. So naturally, America is to be blamed for the opportunity which has been lost. Otherwise, that was available. That was a time when Taliban were very much prone to the negotiations, and they could have been brought on to some common point, common sort of narrative. But unfortunately, India played its own game. Ashraf Ghani kept on hanging around, and America never played that role of finding a solution, political solution to the whole issue.
Right. General Sahib, the fact, if you remember, there was a Doha agreement which led to the drawdown and eventually the withdrawal. Parts of it were classified, and the US also had the capacity to declassify those factors or those agreements if it thought that Taliban is not cooperating with the American government, so far the American government has not declassified those texts. Can we say that parts of Doha Agreement still hold, and apparently in coming days we are going to see Afghan Taliban cooperating more, creating a more inclusive government?
I think we must expect, because the international community is demanding that.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I think the Taliban are facing some kind of friction within their own ranks. There is a which was negotiated, the team which was sitting in Doha and they were negotiating. They have some ideas in their mind, and there are certain orthodox type of Taliban who are in Kandahar, never really went abroad or to Doha to really listen to the other side. They perhaps are not prepared to change their ways. That is why you see that they are coming back to the old-fashioned these punishments, etc., and other things regarding the girls' education, etc. But all the same, now the international community must understand that when America decided to negotiate with the Taliban and sought the guarantees for certain things, at that time I think they had expected that the future rulers are going to be Taliban.
Right.
So naturally, issue should not be debated.
The onus lies there. The onus lies there. I get this point, Jatul Saab. Allow me to actually bring back in Asim Iftikhar Saab. Asim Saab, if you want to comment on the article that was written today, please do. I'm told that we are left with limited time, so your answer is going to be the last one in the program. Please go ahead, sir.
Yeah, thank you. I think the Prime Minister's article, it articulates the sentiments of the Pakistani nation very clearly. I think we have had enough of this shifting of the blame and this blame game that has been going on for many years, and for wrong reasons, because it has now been proven that the causes of failure of the international project in Afghanistan were mostly of their own making, and these were mostly internal to Afghanistan. This has been vindicated by what has happened recently in Afghanistan. So first point is that we have been advising all along that there was no military solution to Afghanistan, and this has also been vindicated. And the important thing to note in all of this is that there were some spoilers within Afghanistan and outside Afghanistan, specifically India, for example, which were utilizing their presence in the garb of development in Afghanistan to carry out terrorism against Pakistan, but at the same time also misleading the international community, particularly the US, about the capabilities of the Ashraf Ghani government and the capabilities of the army, etc. All of that just crumbled. So that's why you see India today is totally isolated on what's happened in Afghanistan and about the future prospects of what's going to happen in Afghanistan. It has no role whatsoever. The Pakistan's role, as you remember, apart from advising that there was no military solution, we had a fundamental role in facilitating the Doha peace process. We were the ones who facilitated that process, that the US engaged itself. They gave legitimacy to the Taliban. So in the end, I think it crumbled because the withdrawal took place.
Right, Asim Saab, that's a very good point. I'm told that we have run out of time. Asim Iftikhar Saab, thank you very much for your contribution. Lieutenant General Retired Amjad Shoaib Saab, Dr. Zafar Nawaz Jaspal Saab, thank you very much, sirs, for your participation and valuable input. Viewers, I had a lot of things in mind, and we are going to, in coming days, keep on discussing them as well. Regarding Prime Minister's article, I think when everybody else doesn't want to be judicious to the state of affairs on ground, somebody has to actually put the truth out there. So the Prime Minister, what he did was to remind the people that Pakistan and Pakistanis are the good guys, and we have been actually taking blows for you. And in the end, you end up blaming us. That is not on. I'm told that we have to conclude the program here, but here's another very good or heartening fact, that this time when India actually spoke, and usually India tries to attack Pakistan at the UNG as well, one of Pakistan's daughter, Saima Salim, was there to respond. And in her right to response, she actually was very articulate. But given that she is not only a diplomat, but also a diplomat who is differently able, who actually read from Braille, was really really heartening for any person who believes in women's empowerment and their ability to shine. Here is another daughter of Pakistan who was shining at the UNGS forum. Let us conclude at listening to what she had to say about her participation.
Jammu and Kashmir neither is a so-called integral part of India, nor is it India's internal matter. India remains in occupation of an internationally recognized disputed territory whose final disposition needs to be decided in accordance with the democratic principle of a free and impartial plebiscite under the United Nations auspices as provided for under numerous resolutions of the Security Council. The government of Pakistan has recently released a comprehensive and well-researched dossier containing the entire range of gross, systematic and widespread violations of human rights being perpetrated by Indian security forces in the occupied territory. We call upon the international community to take cognizance of the compelling evidence and hold India accountable for the heinous crimes. If India has nothing to hide, it must accept a United Nations Commission of Inquiry and agree to implement the Security Council resolutions stipulating a plebiscite to enable the people of Jammu and Kashmir to exercise their right to self-determination.